Good morning, everyone. If you have your Bibles, we will be in Luke chapter 6 in just a little bit. I hope you'll take the time to open up and follow along with me as we read together from Luke chapter 6 in just a minute. Appreciate you being here today. I like to see familiar faces and faces that I haven't seen in a while, and all the friends and families. I love to hear the little children, and glad that they're here. Just really special time to be together. In this world, it seems like there's a lot of frustrations and doubts and uncertainties. There is violence and there is killings and attempted assassinations, and all of those things on a national level sometimes reflect what's going on in the hearts of people in a personal way, with diagnosis and hardships and abuse and neglect and worries and fears and doubts and frustrations and all of these things. And so whether we're talking about situations on a personal level, in a home, in a workplace, in a congregation, in a community, or things in a national level that we don't really have much to say about, but we see it happening, and we're worried about the state of our nation and our people. We look sometimes for something and someone who is different, where there is righteousness and goodness and purity and strength and might and eternity. Someone that is holy and set aside from all that is so common in this world. And so far, as we've been going through the book of Luke, we've noticed that there's one who emerges in just this way, who is our anchor in unsteady times. So far in chapters 1 through 5 of Luke, we learned that as he testifies of Jesus, we find Jesus, who is someone who is sent from heaven with angels announcing him. That he is the Son of the Highest, that he is the inheritor of the throne of David, one who will reign forever and one whose kingdom will have no end, that he is the Son that was long awaited, that he is the Son of God, the representation of God's goodwill towards men, the salvation from God, that he grew like any other man, but with more wisdom and in favor with man and with God, that he is the Son of God in whom the Father is well pleased, that he is the one who was descended from David and often called the Son of David, the son of Abraham and Adam, and all the way back to God, the one who battles the devil face to face, and he commands the demons, and even they listen to him. He heals the sick too. And he preached the good news of the kingdom. And he calls the common man to follow him. And then he makes them uncommon and holy. And the last time that we were in the book of Luke in chapter 5, we learned that he is the bridegroom. And that he wears a very special title called the Son of Man. The Son of Man was a prophetic title that was given all the way back in the book of Daniel. And it's a picture of the Messiah, a picture of a triumphant king coming in clouds, leading an angelic army with great glory and with the trumpet call of everlasting dominion. And Jesus applies that title to him in Luke chapter 5. And then later we read more directly in Matthew chapter 24. Jesus said, "The Son of Man will appear in heaven, and that all the tribes on the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with great sound of the trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other." And then before his crucifixion, standing before the Sanhedrin, the high priest said to him, "I will put you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Christ, the Son of God." And Jesus said to him, "It is as you said. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you will see," and here's that title again, "you will see the Son of Man," with capital letters, the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. So with this title, we have a twofold title. In one sense, he is the Son of Man who is descended from man. He was flesh and blood like us. And so he was the Son of Man with small letters. But in another way, he is deity. Therefore, he is the Son of Man with capital letters. He is the Son of Man who is riding on the clouds as sovereign warrior, mighty God, with dominion and glory and a kingdom served by all nations and languages, everlasting and undestroyed. And today we read that the Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath. We begin in chapter 6 and verse 1. And it happened on the second Sabbath, after the first, that he went through the grain fields, and his disciples plucked the heads of the grain and ate them, rubbing them in their hands. I see these men doing what you might see anybody walking through grain fields, and they're maybe hungry or want to taste some of the grain. They just pluck them up, just rub them in their hands, get all that chaff off, blow it off, and then pop it in their mouth. This is what the disciples are doing as they walk with Jesus down the road. Plucking grain was not against the law. We're going to find out that it wasn't even against the law on the Sabbath. Plucking grain was something that was very permissible under the old law. In fact, the landowners were told to leave some of the grain in the field for the poor people and leave some of it out there for people who are traveling by so that they can have it when they come by. This, what the disciples are doing here, is not reaping. It's not sifting and threshing. It's not carrying heavy burdens. It's not harvesting in any way, which was permitted on the Sabbath. But it was, however, the Sabbath. And so there's a problem with this. In verse 2, some of the Pharisees said to them, "Why are you doing what is not lawful on the Sabbath?" You see, it wasn't lawful to carry burdens on the Sabbath. It wasn't lawful to harvest on the Sabbath, but what they're doing is not harvesting. But the problem that they have is not so much with the law, it's with their oral traditions of their elders who set up boundaries so that they wouldn't go past the law. And the problem with that is that they made those boundaries equal or greater to the law of God. And so they say, this is not lawful to do on the Sabbath, and we're going to find that Jesus is going to challenge them with that. It's important for us to know as we study the New Testament some of the history which goes back to the Old Testament. So let me tell you a little bit about the Sabbath. And we go back to first mentions. The first mention of the Sabbath is when Israel has emerged from Egypt and they're in the wilderness and they're hungry. And God is going to give them manna. But this manna comes with restrictions. They're to pick up the manna on 6 days of the week. They can pick it up and they can bake it, they can boil it, they can do everything with it that they need. But if they pick up too much and they leave it for the next day, it's going to be spoiled. Except for on that Sabbath, that seventh day. On the sixth day, they pick up, only on the sixth day, they pick up enough for that day and the next day. And it won't spoil on that next day, on the seventh day. And there's a reason for that. We'll get to that in just a second. And so in Exodus chapter 6, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a Sabbath rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake today, and boil what you will boil, and lay up for yourselves all that remains to be kept until the morning." And so that's the first time that we read the word Sabbath. And it's a Sabbath rest. But just a few chapters later, this Sabbath rest becomes law. It becomes law when the Lord delivers the Ten Commandments. And in those Ten Commandments, we have this: remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you will labor and do all of the work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work. You, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, the sea and all that are in them, and he rested on the seventh day. Therefore, the Lord blessed the Sabbath day, and he hallowed it. That means he made it a holy day. And so not only was this a day of rest, not only was it law, but we notice that it was reflective. And he goes all the way back to Genesis to talk about where this came from. And so if we go back to Genesis chapter 2, which obviously follows chapter 1, where God made everything, the heavens and the earth, and all that was in it. And then we come to chapter 2, thus the heavens and the earth, and all the hosts of them were finished. And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all of his work which he had done. Then God blessed the seventh day, and he sanctified it, because in it he rested from all of the work which God had created and made. And so this seventh day becomes a point of reference. It's a marker about the Maker, really. It reminds us, it's like a property line. The Sabbath came at the end of all the creation, like a marker that reminds us that he made everything that was here, and now we have this marker. It's a Sabbath. It's a day of rest. And so he sanctified it. He set it aside. He made it holy. Different versions read it differently. hallowed it, set it apart is what that means. In Exodus 20, when he gave the command, it says that you are to keep it holy. This seventh day, the Sabbath, become known as the Sabbath, which it means rest, literally an intermission. It's to cease, to put it to rest. Now, this is different than just saying, I need to lay down and rest. If that was the inference there, then we would see that God would expend energy and that he would, get tired. But this isn't the God who gets tired. This is the God who just put it to rest. He ceased. There was an intermission. Sometimes if somebody's arguing a point, we might just ask them, put it to rest, or something of that nature. He put his work to rest. Later, this word got connected with another word that's used more in our modern language as a sabbatical. And that pertains to the Sabbath. And so today we know it as a break or a change in the normal routine. When the summertime comes, a teacher might take a sabbatical from teaching, and during that time they may travel, they may read, they may make preparations for the next year, but it's different from their normal routine. It's not only used for rest and relaxation, but it's purposeful and it's intentional. And many ministers still today will take a sabbatical. That means that they will go away from their regular routine, oftentimes by themselves. They will read, they'll be in the Word, in prayer, fasting, in nature, getting kind of reconnected. And it's an intermission from the regular routine. And it's a time of remembrance and reflection. That's why God gave it, and that's why the commandment came. In it, God made the world in 6 days. On the seventh day, he rested. And so we look back at that and what all God had done. The marker of the Sabbath reminds us that creation and all the creation is encompassed by our Creator. In Psalm 24:1, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness of the world and those who dwell therein. And it's the Sabbath that reminds us of our Maker. And since we are his creation, the Sabbath was used to teach Israel a couple of things. One, not just to rest, but reliance. If they followed his word, they would have plenty on that day of rest. If they just listened to him on days 1 through 6, then on the seventh day, even though they weren't harvesting, they weren't picking things up, they weren't picking up the manna, they would have plenty. They learned to rely on the God of provision. Remember Abraham on the mountain when he went to sacrifice Isaac and God provided that ram. He said, this is the Lord, the God of provision. Israel was learning that this is the God of provision. He would provide for them if they would prepare the right way. Also, it was a time to reconnect, a time when they would cease from their regular cares, and this would give them the opportunity to firm up their bond with God. Because let's admit it, those days are busy. We all have heavy schedules. We have a deadline to meet, and there's always more to do than what we can accomplish in a day. And if we get carried away with all those details, other things have to be set aside. And sometimes, if we're honest with ourselves, it might be the kingdom, it might be the king, it might be his church. And so there was times when they had to just get away from their regular routine, have some rest, use it as a time of remembrance and reflection, reliance, and reconnection. And this would take preparation. We have to prepare for things that are important. If there's a wedding coming up, a graduation, an open house, things of this nature, we make preparations. Usually not just the day before, but weeks in advance. Well, when this day came up, they had to make preparations. They had to collect the manna the day before. If there were things that needed to be done on that day, they couldn't do them. They had to prepare in advance for that special day. And so in that way, the Sabbath was dictatorial because it would affect, first of all, their economy. They weren't to work on this day. There couldn't be bartering and buying and selling and trading. It would affect their schedule because this day was different from the rest and they had to make preparations the other days for this day. It would affect their travel. They couldn't travel on the Sabbath, not the long distances. So their economy, their schedule, their travel, but most of all, it was to affect their heart. Their heart, to remember who God is and what he did, to reflect on him and to connect with God. So we might ask, what happened to the Sabbath? I don't want to dwell on this a long time, but it's a good question to ask. What happened to the Sabbath was the resurrection of Christ. The resurrection of Christ happened on the first day of the week. You might remember in John 20 and other passages where Mary and the women, they came early in the morning on the first day of the week, and he wasn't in the tomb. He had risen. And from that day on, the church met and the people gathered on that special day, which was the first day of the week. In Acts 20 and 7, they came together on the first day of the week to break bread. That is, to take communion, to take the Lord's Supper. And then again, they were reconnecting. They were remembering. They were remembering Jesus. And so that day became also a day of rest in many ways, where we step aside from our usual activities and work schedules, and we come here together on the first day of the week. Many states still have Sunday laws ensuring that states and commerce not encroach on religious convictions. Like the Sabbath, Sundays take preparations. They take preparations for everybody. If you come here and the preacher's not prepared, you'd be disappointed. If you go to your Bible class and the preacher's not prepared, you'd be disappointed. The song leader prepares in advance the songs that they're going to lead. The person presiding over the Lord's table is preparing in advance. The people who are making the prayers for the whole congregation give some thought to that in advance. The people who set up the Lord's table so that we have these emblems available for us, they do that in advance. Somebody who's cleaning the building, there's a lot of preparation that comes into this day, and all of you make those preparations. You take the time off of work. You set your schedule aside so that you can be here on this day, even though many times there's other things that could be happening on this time. We all make preparations. Sometimes you pick up your family or somebody who don't have a ride, and you have to plan ahead for that. You plan your meals around this time. It takes preparation. I remember when I was in high school and probably elementary or middle school, although I don't remember it too much. If I was going to class and I hadn't completed my assignment, there was dread because I wasn't prepared. But on the days that I was prepared, I had my homework done, I had my preparation made for the test that was coming up, there's a lot more joy coming into class than those other times. And so it is, when we make the preparations to come together, there's a lot more joy, there's a lot more excitement. You know, I have a friend, Paul, who preaches, and he said, sometimes on Sunday mornings I feel like the guy being called down on The Price is Right, you know. Come on down, and he's walking down the aisle ready to preach. He's so excited because he's prepared. He has a message of joy to share. And I think that when we are prepared for this worship, whatever part we play as we all participate, there is excitement when we are prepared to be here. When we wake up in the morning and we're singing those songs even before we come here. And we've made preparation in prayer and in thought, and we've studied for the Bible class in advance. Someone once said, I don't know who wrote this, how you prepare for Sunday gatherings determines your level of excitement, enthusiasm, expectation, and anticipation. I believe that to be true. This first day of the week is dictatorial also, and it also affects our economy because people are taking off work to be here. It affects our schedule because they're moving other things aside so that they can be together. It affects our travel. Even if we have to be gone, we tune in by the internet or we worship with a congregation in the area we are. But most of all, our hope is that it affects our hearts. And this is where the Pharisees often failed. It didn't affect their heart. I want to share the next passage here. Skip down a couple verses if you're in Luke chapter 6. And notice what happened on another Sabbath. Luke chapter 6 now in verse 6. It happened on another Sabbath also, that he entered the synagogue and taught, and a man was there whose right hand had withered. He had a problem with his right hand. The scribes and the Pharisees watched him closely, whether he would heal on the Sabbath, that they might find an accusation against him. There's somebody there with a disability. They're not concerned about helping that man or what Jesus would do with this man to make him well, only that if he does something on the Sabbath, that they would find a reason to accuse him. How cold-hearted can someone be? Verse 11, but he knew their thoughts and said to the man who had a withered hand, arise and stand here. And he arose and stood. I wonder sometimes if this man was excited with anticipation, I'm going to be healed today, or if he was embarrassed because Jesus was pointing out something in front of the rest of the group. I don't know how this went down, but watch what Jesus does in verse 9. Jesus said to them, I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do evil, to save life or destroy life? You see, they were so interested in what you can't do on the Sabbath, Jesus flipped it on them and says, what can you do on the Sabbath? Can you save? Can you give life? Can you do good on the Sabbath? And he looked around at them and he said to the man, stretch out your hand. And he did so. And his hand was restored as whole as the other. Now you would think that everybody would just begin to glorify God and say, praise God for this healing. We're so grateful for what you had did and now what you've done, and now this man can go out and live a more normal life. But in verse 11, they were filled with rage, and they discussed with one another what they might do to Jesus. You see, they allowed the Sabbath to impact their economy and their schedule and their travel and all these things, but not their heart. The Son of Man was standing right there before them. He was proving who he was with this miracle. And they were filled with rage. What can we do with him? They saw their rules, but they failed to see the ruler. They saw their list, but they failed to see the Lord. And they wanted to know what they might do with Jesus, and they missed out. They should have asked what Jesus could do with them. Like Peter, depart from me, Lord, I'm a sinful man. From now on, I'll make you a fisher of men. Like Levi, follow me. And he rose and he followed him. Well, we come back to the passage that we skipped over. Jesus begins to explain the Sabbath and who he is. In verse 3, Jesus answered them and said, have you not ever even read this? What David did when he was hungry and those who were with him? How he went into the house of God and took and ate the showbread. This was also called the holy bread, the showbread, and also gave some to those who were with him, which is not lawful for any but the priest to eat. So now Jesus goes all the way back to 1 Samuel chapter 21, and he reminds them, he probably didn't have to tell them, of the story of David and the holy bread. David was on the run from King Saul. King Saul wanted to kill David. He was jealous of David, and David fled. God had told David that he would be the anointed one, the one who would be the next king. And he had anointed him with Samuel. And so David was preserving his life. And he's hungry, and he has some men with him, and he goes to the temple, and the priest there has nothing for David to eat, only the showbread, which was not legal for anybody to eat at any time, except for the priest when they were bringing in the new showbread, the bread, the holy bread that was before God. Only the priest could eat that bread. But David talked the priest into letting him have it, and he and his men took it. But David was the honored monarch. David was looked up to here generations later when Jesus was on this earth in the physical form. They considered David great. He brought Israel together. He was the one who planned the temple. He was the one who brought Israel into the golden age of their existence. And so they didn't rebuke David. They didn't look back and say, David shouldn't have done this. And what the disciples did was not the same as what David and his men was doing. It was completely different, because here the disciples are taking some grain, blowing off the chaff and eating it. The men of David and David went in and they ate the bread which they should not eat. And Jesus plainly says what they did, which is not lawful. Jesus' disciples, what they were doing was lawful. They were without guilt. And so I don't want you to get confused here, as some people do. Some people deduce that what Jesus was doing here is legalizing David's actions from generations ago. That's not what's going on. Their idea and their thinking is this way, that God changes laws based on human need and desire. And that's kind of a humanist worldview, that if God's law is unpleasant, then we just change it. That the word of the Lord is subservient to human needs and can be broken for adequate cause. That's not what Jesus is teaching. That doesn't even make sense in the rest of the ministry of Jesus. If that was true, if that was the case, then why suffer at all? Certainly the Roman cross was more adequate cause than a snack for the disciples, so why even go to the cross if that's the case? Jesus is clearly not teaching this. He said what they did was not lawful. And so Jesus' appeal to the Scriptures is He makes this appeal to stress something. That is the unfairness, the hypocrisy, the deceit of the Pharisees, who improperly accepted David's illegal actions as allowable, but who nevertheless falsely charged Jesus and his disciples with the capital offense of Sabbath breaking, basing it on the actions that were completely innocent. He's talking about the hardness and the deceit of their heart. In a sense, Jesus is freeing the Sabbath from the folly of the Pharisees and the traditions of the elders. Further, if it would have been okay for David the king, it would have been okay for the king's descendants, of whom David is a descendant, often called the son of David. Jesus, the son of David. But Jesus isn't condoning the disciples' actions on the philosophy that David did it too. He's not condoning the disciples' actions that the law changes to appease them, nor that he was the son of David, which he was. His condoning the disciples' actions was based on two things at least. One, that what the disciples doing were lawful, and these religious leaders should know the law as it was intended better than their own traditions. And number two, in spite of being David's son, or the son of David, that pales in comparison to the other aspects of Christ. Notice verse 5. And he said to them, the Son of Man, he's still using that title, the Son of Man is also Lord of the Sabbath. Now, when he said that he was the Son of Man, they wanted to kill him. But now he's saying not only is he the Son of Man, but he is the Lord of the Sabbath. And in the Jewish mind, this was equivalent to claiming that he was deity. In fact, he is. He controls the Sabbath. He's not controlled by the Sabbath. Everyone else is. But he controls it because he made it. He was there in the beginning. He created everything in days 1 through 6. On day 7th, he was the one who sanctified it. And so when the Pharisees, who are untouched, whose heart grows harder, they're filled with rage, and they discuss with one another what they might do with Jesus. Well, what could they do to the Lord of the Sabbath? Could they accuse him? Could they threaten him? Could they rage against him? Could they kill him? They did all of that. They did all of that. They accused him and he reasoned with them. They threatened him and he remained silent. Or they threatened him and sometimes he remained silent, but he was resilient. And when they raged against him, he remained rational. And when they killed him, he raised from the dead. The Pharisees' heart was so cold. They allowed the Sabbath to impact their economy and their schedule and their travel, but not their heart. The Son of Man, the Lord of the Sabbath, was there before them. They saw the rules and they failed to see the ruler. They saw the list and they failed to see the Lord. Today, my hope is this, that we will agree to honor the list and the Lord. That we will agree to honor the ruler and his rules. Today, my hope is this, that we'll agree to honor all of these. And in fact, let the words of Christ dwell in us richly. And let the peace of God, who is Christ Jesus, rule in our hearts. As frustrating as it was to the Pharisees to try to figure out what to do with Jesus, the real question we as individuals have to wrestle with is this. What will you do with Jesus? Or maybe even better, what will you let Jesus do to you? If we can assist you in a spiritual way, we invite you to come while we stand and sing.